Dun. Hello. Dun 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 dun. Hello, good morning. Got my coffee here. Welcome back to the stream. Really haven't figured out quite what to say when we get started yet. I'm not quite as tired as I was last time, but it is still a little bit early for me, so I've got plenty of coffee to keep me going. All right. I think everything is all set up. Here we go. Okie dokie, let's get started. So, welcome to the live stream here. Today we're going to be working on a new miniature. You can see that I have my concept art up here loaded up on the screen. This is our Spire-Born character. Last stream we talked a lot about this new faction, and I got some ideas from some viewers and came up with some new concepts as well. So this is our goal today. Now, it takes me a little while to go through a lot of the detail work, so I'm not going to finish for sure in just a couple hours, but I already have a base mesh set up in Blender, so my real goal for today's stream specifically is to start work on some of these like armor panels and some of the things like the mask, as well as some weapons. Probably not fully detailed. Oh, and of course, like the pants and all that stuff. It almost certainly won't be fully detailed, but it is going to be blocked out and roughly where I want it, so that I can then go back in and just add details on the sculpt. Ethan, thank you. Thank you for watching as well. Yeah, so this stream should serve as kind of like a introduction to how to start adding these components once you have a base mesh all set up in Blender. Now, last time I tried to do a little bit of work on Blender live and I got really nervous. So hopefully that won't happen today, but we'll see. And yeah, all right. In that case, let's get into Blender. Here we go. There we go. Good. Hopefully y'all can see that. Now, you can see here is my base mesh. If you saw my video I posted this week, I just recently went through and remade my base meshes so that they would be perfectly scaled. This one is the 28mm version, which you could see up here. That can be adjusted later, but just so that it's ready to go once I finish it, at least for the 28mm size, I've already got that all set up. This one I've also been playing around with, like remeshing, decimating. Decimating, if you don't know, is taking a large poly model and making it less polygons, but it does lead to some not great geometry. So this is not the finished body for the character at all, but it should give me the proportions and everything that I need to start blocking in details. Huh. All right. So, yeah, I guess we'll get started here. So basically what I always do once I start off a new sculpt is I first just go through and block out some of the major shapes. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. So we'll start with, adding a new mesh here. Let's see. So this base mesh here, the figure, is something I sculpted myself. I've been thinking about making it available to people to use as well, but haven't quite figured out how to make it available yet. But yeah, this is my own work here. You can see, actually, This might be an interesting thing for people to see. You can see that this is actually made up of multiple parts that I have since put together. See if I can hide that and hide this. So what I do to make a base mesh is I start with simple like chunks, which each go somewhere, kind of sculpt them into roughly the right shape. And then once I have all those, I remesh them into a single model so that it can be posed a little more cleanly. If you try to attach this to an armature and pose this with the pieces separated, you'll get weird deformation in like some of those joints. So it is best to have a single, in my experience, it's best to have a single model when you're posing, at least a single base body. Yeah, that process is, I haven't smoothed it out yet. So I'm not quite ready to show it on stream yet, but yeah. Okay, let's get back to this guy. All right. So as you can see, I've loaded up a little basic plane here. And I can just move this around, rotate it. So for some objects, you always kind of want to start with an object as close to what you're looking for as possible. So for objects like the armor plate on the chest, I'm just going to start off with a simple plane. And I can kind of scale it up and down, get it kind of close. That looks more or less good. Then we're going to subdivide it. There are a couple ways to subdivide a mesh like this, and they all do slightly different things to it. If you just hit Control 2 or Control and any number, Control 3, that will automatically apply a subdivision here. And the levels of subdivision that you want. But as you can see, this version also makes it round, which is not really what I want. You could click simple. This keeps it as a square here, but if I apply, I've got to back out of, there we go. If I apply, you'll see that it is subdivided it once and twice. So this is what I need to have to really adjust the shape and everything. I want to keep it as flat as possible for as long as possible so that it's easier to make fine-tuned adjustments. But once it's about here, then I can start to adjust the shape. All right, so I'm just going to bring in the corners a little bit. If you look at the concept art, I should have prepared a way to see the concept art on screen as well. I can look at it very easily, but it's hard to show you very quickly and go back. If you look at the concept art, it's kind of tilted. This is supposed to be a piece of scrap metal that this character found somewhere in the Spire Seas. So I want to make that nice and skewed and tilted. Also in the concept art, it's kind of got this one side is kind of missing. I don't care too much about keeping these vertices like aligned here at this point. But I am making sure that they're lined up in this direction at least. And actually, this whole thing, I'm going to move over a little bit. I'm already imagining where things like straps are going to go, so I know that this is going to be a strap up here, this is going to be a strap over here, and there's probably going to be one coming down as well. So I'm kind of setting that up. This, by the way, what I'm doing now is, I mean, technically, it's like the most basic version of this, but it's technically hard surface sculpting. So I'm just using a mouse and keyboard. But once I get into like sculpting details, I do use a pen tablet. All right. I think that's about roughly where I want it. So now, to bend this to the right shape, I could project it onto the torso and make it match exactly the mesh underneath, but that's not quite what I want. I want a more clean, rounded surface. So instead, make sure I'm in transparency mode. I'm going to kind of do it by hand and just roughly match where I want this to go. Also, good to keep in mind that details like this, when 3D printing, the printer resolution is so small that making super fine detail on a 28mm model, it's just not going to, matter. It's not going to show up. So I'm also thinking about like how thick this is going to have to be. Let me make this a little more up there. There you go. And actually, it might be kind of interesting if that's just a one flat side panel. Looks more like a piece of sheet metal. Okay. There. You can see there are ways to do this more automatically and smoother, but that's not really what I'm looking for right now. So then we're going to add a modifier. We're going to add solidify, and we're going to bump up the thickness here. Now, I cracked my knuckles. For the print itself, to change this into an STL, we want to make sure that any pieces that we have here are overlapping fully. If there's a little gap here, and there's basically a pocket, an air pocket between this mesh and this mesh, that I believe will show up in the STL itself. So then when you're printing, there'll be a little pocket of unprinted resin, which is not good. You don't want that. So one of the keys here, this is a good example. A little overhang here is okay, but if I cover that up with something else, that will be messy. Not like the football star. So we're just going to make that extra thick to make sure things overlap. There we go. You can see it fully goes into the other mesh. All right. I think that's good for now. This is a great example of when like what you're seeing on screen, you have to filter that through what's going to come out on the tabletop. This looks like a big hunking piece of stuff, but once you actually print it, it's going to look pretty tiny. In fact, this might even be too small. So now that I have the shape pretty much set, I'm just going to rotate it and move it a little off here. There we go. Basically giving it enough thickness for the printer to pick it up clearly. Whoops. Wrong axis. There we go. That's still intersecting, so that's all good. Okay. I'll definitely, excuse me. Oops. I'm gonna have to figure that out. I'm gonna have to figure out how to fix that someday. Okay. So now that that's all set up, more or less, I'll definitely add more details to it later, but that's good enough for just blocking it out. Let's add some pants. So that's kind of one way, is to make a mesh for an object to start off. You have just take another mesh like a flat panel and pop it in there and kind of get it to the right size. The other way to do it is to add a full-on object. So we're going to add a mesh, we're going to add a cube. Make sure it stays centered here. There we go, that's probably good. There are essentially infinite ways to do this, but I'm going to scale on the x-axis. And by the way, I know you can't necessarily see what I'm pressing. There's a way to do that, but I haven't figured that out yet. So if you're curious about any of my shortcuts, just let me know. That's more or less good. That's probably going to be fine. Get the basic shape set up, and then for this one, instead of just subdividing it right away, we're going to press Ctrl R and get a loop cut. We're going to put that right in the middle. Good. And then we're going to take these two, and we're going to press E to extrude them. Down like that. Cool, cool. We're just going to keep doing that again, one more time. So how do I change from a square to this shape? So you can see here are my vertices. So I'm just going to select them, and then I'm pressing S, which scales. And right now, since I'm flat on the view, it's going to scale only in that direction. So you have to be a little careful with this toggle X-ray mode. Hope you can see that. So with this on, I can hit all of the vertices in that plane. But if I turn it off and I do the same thing, it's only going to hit 2 of them. And then it's going to give me a wonky shape. So be careful, I make that mistake all the time. So just make sure this is on when you need it and off when you, when you need it. This one, now, so I'm going to select all of those. I'm going to scale it in a little bit. I'm going to adjust it here. And then to get it longer, press E, and it'll just pull out an extrusion. I think that looks pretty good. Okay. Now, to get this to match, we're going to have to mirror it. And to do that, there is something we want to do first. Actually, you know what? This is a little unusual, but this is how my sculpting usually goes. We're going to remove these edges. Oh, I see. So Ethan, good question. Selecting a vert instead of the whole cube. It's something I kind of do automatically at this point, but right now you can see I select the whole object. This is the default screen on Blender, is this mode, and this is up here, object mode. If I select something and I press tab, then I've switched into edit mode. And in object mode, you're moving the whole thing around, including the origin. In edit mode, you're able to select individual parts of each one. So while I'm working on one thing, like the pants, I'm mostly in edit mode. And then when you're putting everything together or trying to move the whole object, I tab out into object mode. So it's kind of, that's why it's tab. You kind of bounce back and forth between them. Most, I would say probably most of what you do for a miniature is, oh no, it's not going to do that, is it? All right, that's fine. So I want that. Also, when you're in edit mode, you can select different things. So you can either select a whole face, you can select an edge, which is what I did earlier, or you can select a single vertice. No problem, Ethan. It is understandably very confusing when people, like myself probably, on YouTube just say like, just go into edit mode, go into object mode. That's, at some point, I'm gonna refresh my basic explanations as well. All right, now here's a cool little trick. So I basically remade this line here so that the pants would come in here instead of meeting in the middle line. I'm going to mirror this, so I don't want this intersection to happen. It's going to cause some weirdness. I can get around that by having them meet and then meet in the middle. So I have this set up, but as you can see, there's no faces here. Now, if you have 4 points set up, Blender knows that it wants to make a 4-sided polygon. That's usually the best. So you can select 2 points on the edge of that square and just press F. And F is going to make a face along those 4 points. Now, nice thing. Ooh, I'm already encountering another issue here. Oh no, this should be fine. Maybe not. So usually, if you have a series of these all set up, you can just keep pressing F and it'll keep building those polygons. But as you can see here, if I press F, it does something a little weird. It is assuming that I want to connect here and here, which is not correct. So you might have to instead select the 4 points, press F, and then it'll know exactly what you want. And then here again, it's not sure, I'm pressing F, it's not sure if I want to connect this way or this way. So since Blender doesn't know automatically, I'm just going to tell it. And then here again, since it's pretty clear, press F and it'll connect in. There we go. So now you can see it's a fully enclosed mesh. Okay. I'm going to play with this a little more. I'm going to shrink this down a little bit. We're going to move it back. This too. Shrink down. I do like these poofy pants, but this is a little too poofy. So I'm going to shrink that a bit and move it back as well. Now this is going to get smaller when you subdivide it. It's kind of like throwing something in the wash. So I don't want to make it too small yet. Okay, I think that's good. All right, now to finish our mirroring situation, what I'm actually going to do is delete this side. So I'm just going to select all those, press delete, and delete the vertices themselves. Now we have this open space here, but that's going to be okay. We're going to add a modifier. You could do this with a hotkey, but I'm going to show you. And click mirror. Now by default, mirroring will mirror across the origin point, which is the center of the known universe in Blender. Now this spot here is usually where you want things to mirror around. But you can change that by adding an object to mirror around instead. That way if you move your object away from the center, then it'll still be the same mirroring, but for now this is okay. You can also mirror different axes. You can mirror one or both or multiple. I'm going to get more into those differences when I start doing weapons. But for now, that's pretty good. So now, if I make a change over here, it's going to reflect on both sides, but important to note, this is not actually finished yet. So if I printed this, it would fail. It would come off with just 1/2. So this modifier here is applied in the screen, but to actually make it a single object, you would have to click apply. I don't quite want to do that yet. Sorry, I have a microphone in front of my screen, so I'm also dodging the mic arm. So right now, these two pieces are separate, and I don't want that. So I'm going to turn clipping. Now you can see there's this little gap here. If I have clipping turned on, when the object meets in the middle, then it's going to hit the other side of the mirror. And if everything is set up correctly with this one, auto merge vertices, yep, that has now become a single point. Well, 2 single points, technically. So we're going to do the same thing over here. X, move it in, boom, done. So now these are all connected. They're still not a set piece. I would have to, I'll show you. Here's a good example. So I have this piece, it looks fine here. If I go to sculpting, it's fine, but I can't sculpt on this side. For example, there's actually nothing there. Now right now, since I have it mirrored, it's going to mirror both sides. So that's good. But it's not quite finished yet. I don't want to finish it yet, though, so that's fine. Okay. Ooh. That got wonky. I don't know why that got wonky. Oh, it's probably because I was sculpting on it. Okay. Now, here you can see these vertices are off. It's okay, but if you want to fix that, we're going to select both of them. We're going to scale, press S to scale, press X to scale across the x-axis, and press 0. And that'll line them up on that axis. And we can do that again for Z. Whoops. Scale Z 0. Now they're all lined up. If you scaled it on Y, then it would push them together. So we don't want to do that. But there we go. Lined up again. A lot of learning Blender and sculpting is learning little hotkeys and tricks like this just to make your life a little bit easier. I'm going to take that out a little. Okay. I am going to want to have this more round. So I'm going to add a loop cut. Again, Control R and cut along there. If you don't move it around or anything, you can move this. If you just right click, it'll snap to the center. I'm actually going to scale that along the X, just so it's a little more round. There you go. Mirroring is strange. Which part is difficult? Let's see. We're going to take that and we're going to scale it back in a little bit as well. This is a little too poofy. There we go. I want the pants to be poofy pants, but I don't know how poofy I want the poofy pants to be. Oh no. There we go. Ah, like actually adding the mirror. So there's two ways to do it. If you have your object selected, you can click the little wrench. These are your modifiers. And you can go up to here and add any of these. One of them is mirror. You might be mirroring it, but not be able to see it, in which case you're mirroring something that is already there. So the different axes, for example. Now this will, let me see. I believe, oh, I don't know. I basically only ever use mirroring across the axis like this. And if it's not mirroring correctly, you might have to select something. I have on my screen, I have an origin point set up. So I can select origin, and it'll be basically the same thing, because I have a point at the origin. But you could, for example, mirror across, what is this called? Base mesh? And then, here's a funny thing. If I take that, point it to the screen. As you can see, it's going to follow the center of the base mesh instead of the center of the Blender space. The scene, I should say. I don't want that yet. Alternatively, you can press Control M, I believe. Control M is actually flipping it, which is not what I want. That might be part of it. So make sure you're using the modifier instead of just mirroring it. Also, once you're working on an object in, for example, sculpt mode, these mirrors up here, they'll make it so that what you do on one side is also done on the other side. But it doesn't add material to the other side automatically. Yeah, no problem. There's like 3 different things that are mirror, and they all do something different. Okay. All right, let's keep blocking out these pants here. So this is a pretty good rough, very, very rough shape for what I'm going for. Take that in a little bit. I want those little poofy bits. To make this closer to what I actually want, we can subdivide it. Oh, nice. Let's do a subdivision. But you can see if I subdivide, it makes it rounded again. Now again, I could click simple, and that's going to subdivide it and keep everything straight while adding subdivisions. But I actually want it to be a little rounded. I just don't want it to be this rounded. So to fix that, what I'm going to do is in edit mode, I'm going to add these little edge loops right near where I want it to be. About where I want it to be flat, I'm going to add an extra loop here, and that makes it so that when I subdivide, it keeps that edge relatively straight. So similar here, I'm going to add another little edge loop down to the bottom there. Yep. And I'll probably add another one up here. And then really anywhere where I want, whoops. Anywhere where I want to keep that angle about the same as it is now, I'm going to add that in. So now, when I press Ctrl 2, you can see it keeps this line much straighter. It still curves it a little, but it's much straighter than it was, and you can still see this little floofies. Some little butt circles. Okay. Now, I do want to eventually add in like a belt and things like that. Maybe I can do that right now. Let's see. I'm going to take all of this. I'm going to scale that back a little bit. We're going to scale it on the Y. Your X, Y, and Z keys are your best friend for shortcuts. Basically, anytime you want to adjust things accurately, you can press G and Y and move it on that axis. You can press S and Y and scale it on the axis. You can press R and Y and rotate it along that axis, for example. Okay, I think I'm going to want another loop cut here. Make sure everything stays separate and scale that one a little bigger. Make some space for the butt. There we go. And this actually, I don't want it quite flat. There we go. So it has created this little line there. That'll be okay. All right. Simple plants. Let me fix this a little bit. There we go. So you can add the subdivide from here. So you can click Add Modifier, and that's Solidify. I always have to find it again. Subdivision Surface. You can also use Multi-Resolution, which I'll talk about more at another point. Or if you really just want it to subdivide so that you can sculpt more later, you can press Control and a number. So Control 2, it's going to add more subdivisions. Let me see if something that doesn't have subdivision modifier, I can press Control 4, and that has added 4 levels of subdivision. It's still not applied, so it's not like finished yet, so you can just delete it and it doesn't matter. Be a little careful with that. If you go too far, how can I explain? You don't want to do too many subdivisions on something that you want more or less straight, because the more subdivisions you have, the harder it is to work on even levels. However, once you start sculpting, you're going to want a lot of subdivisions. So I always work with low subdivision numbers first, and then as I get into more and more details, I add more subdivision levels to make sure I can sculpt at those lower, finer resolutions. Okay. I think that's good. All right, that's good enough for pants for now. Let's double check our concept art a little. Yeah, okay. Actually, now might be a good time. So you can see our concept art here. I'll take a sip of coffee. We have blocked in this little guy, and we blocked in our pants. I do want to do the belt at some point, And I want to make sure to do this little arm wrist protector. And I also want to get started on the mask. I think oh yeah. If y'all have any ideas which one you want to see more, I think y'all can let me know. I think probably the mask is the most interesting, and I definitely want to make sure to get it done today, or get it started today. You can see for the mask, I've added a little more detail here. I have these little armor plates coming off, and these little bolts, and the strap here, and these little doohickeys. So for today, I just want to focus on getting this shape and getting these attached. And I'll add details in later. And maybe these other little guys. Maybe. All right, back to Blender. So let's do that. So this is basically one way to add in a object on your character. We're gonna just, by the way, that's Shift A adds a new object, and you can do it that way. However, there is another way to do this. I am going to do something a little different here. This is my base head mesh, and for this one the geometry is already mostly finished, or clean geometry. It follows the circles, so I'm going to use this one. And what we're going to do, actually I've never done this before. I've never done it quite this way before. Click on you, sculpt mode, ignore the green stuff, don't worry about it, it's fine. Yes, I can import the picture into Blender itself. I normally, when I'm sculpting, I use a separate app called PureRef, which is for reference images. I just haven't set it up to show it to you guys yet. I do recommend sculpting with reference for sure. Okay. Here you go. So in sculpt mode, here I'm adding a mask. I actually don't want inside the eyes. By the way, in sculpt mode at all, when you click, you're gonna usually apply something, and when you hold Control, you're gonna do the opposite action. In this case, adding or removing a mask. Masks are something that are very, very useful, that I have so far very little experience in. So now up here on mask, you can do some different actions. I'm going to sharpen it. I wonder if I can sharpen it even more. Yeah, I want to get really clean there. There might be a button to press to make that a little better. I don't know. I do want this point included. Okay, that should work. Now I'm going to take that and I'm going to, I believe it's here. Ooh, this is my first time doing this. Mask extract. There we go. And yep, that should be okay. It did something, but where did it go? Do you mean how does the base mesh change color? Like, whoops. Like the green here, or do you mean the black? The black I'm drawing on. The green is a different story. Let me try that again. Mask extract. I don't want it to project a sculpt. This worked. This worked earlier. I swear. So in sculpt mode, two things. One, you have to make sure you're selecting the object before you go into sculpt mode. Otherwise, if I have this selected and I go into sculpt mode, nothing happens here. It happens down here. Should be happening down there. The other thing is make sure you're selected the right thing. And the other thing is sometimes, like what I think was happening down here, you might be doing the correct thing, but because your mesh is low poly, it doesn't actually show up. But if you do the grab tool, you can actually move it. So the grab tool should basically always work. So if I'm not sure what's going on, I check the grab tool and make sure that I'm doing things correctly. I was getting this to work. I don't know why. Mask extract. That's a 1. Extract, not with a solidify modifier. That did something different. Maybe not. Oh, I think I know what's going on. Ethan, no problem. Thank you for sticking around and asking me questions, by the way. It makes my day. Ooh. Blender freezing does not. Okay. For some reason, I am not getting the mask to work. I might be like loading up a bunch of masks under there that I'm not aware of. I don't know. Okay. Never mind on that one. We're going to remove the mask. So like I said, that's the first time I've tried that. I did get it to work before. I don't know why it's not working on this one. But the other way to do the same thing is to go into our edit mode here and to just select the correct vertices. This might seem a little strange what I'm doing here. So of course, just like any selecting mode, you can press Shift to add to your selection. But here, these are loops. Basically, they're like connected vertices. And this is determined by the edge. You can see that if you see these squares here, they're all like lined up edge to edge. So a loop will select all of the vertices that are fully connected like that. And you can see I've set up this face to have good loops around it. But when you get to a point where there's more than 4 connections, I believe people call these poles, for example, then it doesn't know which direction to start selecting on. So then you have to do, a separate loop, and that loop ends at the other pole. Now here, I don't believe I want to select. Oh, that's okay, because that's another pole. Okay, yes, good. So for the skull, I want about that much of the face. Uh-oh. There we go. Computer slowed down a little bit. Scary. I'm just gonna come in here and select these by hand. Select this ring. Select this ring. Actually, this is probably going to be easier if I just do this mode. There we go. I'm going to select that loop around the eye. Select that one there. So that's what I did want to avoid. So this loop actually goes through the eye, and I don't want to select that. So you can press Shift to select a single point, and then Shift Control, not Alt, and it'll go from one point to the other point. Like I said, Blender is a lot of, so that Shift Control. Oh, it went both ways. That's fine by me, actually. I wanted to do that anyway. Fortunately, Blender lets you control Z selections as well as edits. Okay, so I'm going to leave a little gap in the nose, and I'm going to not take part of the mouth. All right. There we go. So as you can see, this is not as fast as using a mask, but now I have this good, clean geometry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Shift D. I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to, actually, I could probably, oops. Shift D. Move it forward just a little bit. Probably going to move it more forward. Now this is a separate piece of geometry, but it's still contained in the same object. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to separate. I could do by selection, or I could do by loose parts. By selection is just the things I have selected are going to be removed. By loose parts is anything that's not connected. will be removed. There we go. Oh, nice. And as you can see, it applies the same multi-resolution modifier back onto the mask here. Cool. Okay, so we're going to hide that. And we're going to bring our regular base mesh back in. And we're going to have this selected. We're going to call this skull mask. There we go. I'm going to pop that right in there. Cool. Okay. Now this is actually high enough resolution that I probably could sculpt on it. And so yes, selecting those individual lines is a little tricky. Basically, Shift and Control at the same time, it's going to select a line. And Shift Alt is going to select a whole loop. Let me show you one more time on this one, it'll be a little easier. So if I select a point, that's one point. If I press Shift, it adds to that selection. If I press Control, it's not going to do anything until I click another point. And then it's going to add that whole line. And if I press Alt, usually actually click in the middle on the line, on the edge, and it'll select the whole loop. So if I want to select multiple loops, I hold Shift and Alt, and there we go. Can just build up like that. Be careful because it does run into situations where it doesn't know which way to go. All good? Okay. Here's the skull mask. Now I could probably just start sculpting on it, but before I do that, I'm going to run a solidify modifier. I'm going to give it some thickness. Actually, I want to remove the multi-res before I do that. I don't know why that's doing that. That's a little weird. Tap it wonky. That's okay. And actually, oops, select the wrong thing. For a proper skull mask, I'm going to get rid of these ones. That's too much. I think I'm going to need another loop here. So press Control R, loop in there. Oh, here's a little trick as well. So I have this selected. I'm going to select this vert. I'm going to merge at the last selection, and that's going to pop it down into there. Actually, I'm not worrying about this side yet. This side, I'm going to go up. Is that what we want? Don't you worry about that. Take this, Pop these down. Oh, I just went into concentration mode there for a second, forgot to talk. Okay, now just like I did before, I kind of want to close this gap here. So I'm going to take these. The other way to do it is just press M, merge at center. If you don't care where the point ends up, merge at center. There we go. I think that's probably pretty good. Now, just like we did before, I'm going to take half of this, delete it, add a mirror, make sure it's clipping, select the middle line, make sure it's touching. There we go. Always do that. I'm just going to apply. Now we can click solidify. It should be much cleaner. Nice. Still doing weird things here. I think there might be something going on with the geometry up there. Ah, okay. I know what's going on. This is why I was nervous to do this live. I'm still remembering things that have bothered me before. So when I have this, it's just pushing the thickness away from itself. So what I'm going to do is Control A, apply, scale. That should work. Actually, I can apply location as well. That should help with this. There we go. Now if I go further, it's still going to overlap eventually. That's what's going on. You can also apply an offset. Here we go. I think we'll call it good for there. I can always deal with that another time. Okay. Skull Mask has a missing nose. He's got eye sockets. He does not have any teeth set up currently. I'm going to move it out a little. Ooh, that's right. Set origin. There it is. Origin to geometry. There we go. Now, of course, the little nose hole is a nose hole because that's not bone. So it's not going to stick around for very long. But he still has a nose, so I want it to kind of come out over that. I might shove some like piece of metal or something in there. something appropriately post-apocalyptic. Okay. Now, that's more or less okay. I'm going to make this on a separate object for now. Add another plane. Rotate. Move it up here. No problem, Ethan. Thank you for joining. I'm glad you enjoyed. Yeah, just keep at it. That's all it is. Just keep working on it, and you'll get better. That's it. So, good luck, and thank you for stopping by. All right. Now let's see here. Do. All right. Let's take that. Move that over here. Get that about there. There we go. That's a little too pointy, a little too long. There we go. Let's add a mirror to this one as well, just so I can see what it looks like. It's mirroring across its own origin, but I want it to mirror across the origin. There we go. I have this panel. We're gonna extrude again. I do want this to come up, but I don't want it to interfere with the eye socket there. There we go. Extrude again. And again, it's coming out a little bit on the X. Whoop. And this one as well. Move it on the X, just pulling it away from the cheek a little bit. There we go. I do want to make sure this looks kind of like metal, like a sheet of metal, so I don't want it to be too rounded. But I think that's actually okay for now. I'm going to bring that in here. make sure I turn on clipping. And I think we'll just, actually, yeah, I think we'll just go all the way around here. Okay, now another little trick when doing this, I'm going to do this a lot more in a second. But what you can do is you can turn on snapping, snap to face. So now when I move, it's going to automatically align that point to that face. Since I'm moving both, doing that, that's actually, that's new. Maybe that's new in the new version of Blender. Before, it didn't show me the line. That's cool. Either that's new or I've been doing something wrong for a while, both of which are entirely possible. Okay, so now I want to turn that off. I don't want that to interfere with what I'm about to do. There we go. There we go. Almost like a crown. Add one more loop. And honestly, I think I should add another loop in here as well. Move this, make sure that's lower. I do want this to come like right up into there, but I want this to follow the edge a little better. There we go. If I remove transparency, how's that looking? Still, this one, I need it to be behind the actual mask. This one as well. Move that back a little bit. Okay. All of this, I want to move back and in a little. Almost looks like a superhero, which is not not what I was going for. Or supervillain, maybe. Okay. Now with this, I do kind of want to make sure that this is, I'm gonna put a strap coming off here and over the ear. So I want to kind of think about that now, where that's attaching. Actually, that looks pretty good. There we go. That looks a little less like a giant crown now. Okay. Now for this, we're also going to solidify. Add that in. So we make sure we, by the way, the order here is important. So in this situation, we solidify and then we mirror, but we can also mirror and then solidify. In this case, we want this to take place first, before we add the thickness, otherwise there'll be 2 lines here. And we want to avoid that. All right, I'll pop that in there. Now, I'm making sure that he has his face still underneath, but to be honest, on a miniature like this, eventually I'm probably just gonna close off these eye sockets, close off the nose socket, so that it's just a flat space. But for now, you can kind of see it. It's kind of cool. Okay. I think actually that's I think I'm happy with that for now. Pants are a little goofy looking still, but they'll get fixed up. I'm not quite ready to do straps yet. I think it's time to work on a weapon. But I'm going to take a quick break before getting into that. All right. I'll be back. Okay. And we're back. Alright, yes. I definitely want to make sure I finish at least a weapon, or block out at least a weapon on this string. So, let's get to it. First, we're going to assume he's right-handed, because of course we do. No offense to left-handed people. You can always mirror it later. Here we go. We're going to start with a simple cube here, shape it, just scale it until it's a nice handle-sized rectangle. And we're going to lengthen it out. There you go. Weapons in general are a really good example of how what you see on a screen zoomed in, you have to adjust for the scale of a 28mm miniature, which is much smaller. So, for example, this handle doesn't look quite right. It looks way too big to actually comfortably hold in your hand, but because it's going to be so tiny, we actually have to make it much bigger than we expect. Partly for strength and partly just so you can actually see it clearly. Okay. So we're going to work on the two-handed weapon. I'll pop over here. We are going to work on this guy next. In the past, I've made these two-handed weapons way too long, so my goal for this is to make more of a blade, less of a handle. And I originally, according to some of our ideas that we talked about on the stream last time, I was originally going to make this kind of like a pipe, but I think I can, if it's just like really square, it kind of looks like a bar of metal, which is also okay. So I want to keep it nice and angular throughout. The idea being that this faction, the Spire-Born, because they live out in the Spire Seas, don't have much access to wood, trees. So they make everything out of bone and metal. That's pointing to the pants. Those aren't metal pants. Okay. Make sure transparency is on. Select those. We're going to extrude and extrude. This gives us some area to work with for a nice little handle. And then we're going to extrude again. That's a pretty big blade. Okie dokie. I think that's about good. Now, before playing with the thicknesses at all, we just want to make sure that we have a nice, good profile. So we're going to make this a little bit wider on the back. This is going to come in a little bit. Let me make sure, double check. Yeah, okay. Actually, this is going to come down. I'm going to make this come down a little bit. I'm going to add a loop cut somewhere about there. This loop cut is angled because this is angled, but we can fix that. We can scale along the y-axis 0. That'll line everything up. We're also going to take this and we're going to extrude out. Oops. This is going to get moved back down. I think that's looking pretty close. Somewhat close. I do want to make sure I have a point, but it's not necessarily a stabby weapon. Okie doke. Doesn't quite look right for some reason. Ah, I know why. Okay. This angle should come out all the way to there. Is that right? Sculpting on stream. Just gotta hope I'm doing everything correctly. Okay. That'll look okay, regardless. Alright, good enough for now. Make sure we have a little bit of a pommel. And then these, we're going to flatten scale across X. Flatten a little bit. Again, we want to show that it's flatter than the handle, but we don't want it to be super flat, or else it'll just be very, very flimsy. Now for this one, we're going to take this, and we want this to be a little bit thicker than both the blade and the handle, so we're going to actually extrude. Press E to extrude, press S to scale. That's going to scale up across all axes, including the y-axis, so it makes this little uneven shape. So what we're going to do is we're going to scale back down along the y to make it a nice little ring. There we go. Now actually, now that that's there, we can take these. Oops. Oh, actually that'll work. And we're going to match the blade. There we go. Just gonna take that. I think that looks cool. Looks a little more wicked. I can refine this blade shape more later. And actually I want this to be a little bit longer, so it'll show up nice and easily, and I can put a little more detail into it later. And make it look like a point there. Okie doke. I mean, in terms of blocking out a weapon, that's really all you need to do. Add a loop cut here. Select these, make that a little bit bigger. I'm done. I have a feeling I'm going to want to reconcept this weapon and bring it back in. Bring it back into Blender and redo it. My concept art looks much cooler than that. I don't know what happened. Head. Might be that this is... I think this whole thing is like thicker in the concept art. You know what? Maybe if I select all of... Not that. I want to select there. And there. Make that a bit thicker. Ooh, okay, that's more what I'm thinking about. Scale Z to 0. Straighten that up. Make sure this comes out. You can move all of that back a little bit. There we go. The original concept behind this weapon is just that we have like a flat bar of something, like a panel from some building or other, that just went up here and they just took that off and ground down the edges. So this angle doesn't need to be perfect by any means. Okay, then we're gonna add a loop cut all the way through the middle here. And here on the blade, this is gonna be closer to the edge. I'm gonna add another loop cut here. I want you down there somewhere. And we're going to add a final loop cut here on the back of the blade. And I believe we want to add one more. Actually, let's do it here. Then to get a little bit of an edge, we're going to select these ones on the edge. Scale X in just a little. We'll do it on this one as well. Create that nice little point. How does that look? Okay. You want to show that there's an edge, but you don't need it to be an actual sharp edge. That would make printing a nightmare. Okay, I can always refine that a little bit more later, but that's good enough for now. I do want to add that little detail here. I can show you really quickly. I want to add this little thing. So let's go ahead and do that. For this one, I could make it a separate object and then add it on, but usually I find it a little bit, not necessarily easier, but easier in the long run if I just build it out as part of the object itself. So to do that, I'm gonna, create some more loop cuts. These loop cuts are going to be useful later anyway, so I'm not too worried about adding too many of them. do want to make sure I select, there we go. Eventually I'll be adding a whole bunch. For these, actually I do want these to be straight though. Aha, transparency mode. Okay. Was not selected. Oop. Scale. Scale along the Y 0. Scale Y 0. Alt click, scale Y 0. And this one as well. S Y 0. There we go. All this, move along the Y, slide that back down that way. Now I also want to have something here, but here I want to be careful. If I loop cut here, it's just going to go to the tip, and I don't want, this is where I don't want too many loop cuts all in one spot. So I do want to be a little bit careful here. This goes up this way. Actually, this one, in that case, I'm just going to move this down a little. Scale 0. Now the other way to line things up, press N, by the way, if you want to see this information. We have this Z axis. I'm going to copy that, and over here I'm going to paste it. And same over here. Z axis, copy, Z axis, paste. I said earlier in the stream, don't worry, I make the mistake of forgetting to turn on transparency mode all the time. Here's an example. Okay. Control C, Control V. And we want to make sure to scale that to 0 as well. We're going to do the same thing over here. Control C, Control V, S, Z, 0. There we go. This one, I want to move that up just so it looks a little bit cleaner. Now this one as well, I can do something similar. Take that. SC0, and then paste that in there. There we go. But this one, it's close enough that I can just do that. And then I want these to move forward a little bit. It's not a sharp, pointy weapon right now. That's okay. How would we do that if I wanted to do that? I suppose I would take this. And then this is no longer necessary. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. There we go. That's looking a little bit better. Now, I am going to need one more loop cut along here to make this plan work. Oh, come on. There we go. So, even though it's gonna cut right through the tip there, I think it's worth it. Okay. Now with that set up, I'm gonna add one more here. And for this one, we're gonna do things a little bit differently. I want these to all line up. And these ones are a bit separate. Okay. Cool. So now I have these 4 points here and these 4 points here. So what I'm going to do is take that, I'm going to extrude and scale, just like I did for the little ring. And on this one, I'm going to scale Y back down again, just like before. Move that up a little bit. So now I have this little piece sticking off here. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side. So E, scale. Now this is why this is why I try to keep everything as flat as possible, because now you can see if I want to squish this back down, I'm going to have to do a little bit of finagling. So I'm going to scale the Z axis. And it's going to go like that. And I'm going to move on Y. And it's a little warped. So I'm going to have to fix that manually here. So I'm going to take that, press Y, go in there. Oops. Select both of those. There we go. Now, actually, what I'd like is for these, instead of just going straight off in the Y-axis, I want these to kind of come up off of this point. Let's see if I can get that to look right. There we go. That's looking pretty good. So it is much, as you can see, it is much harder to like line everything up when you're at an angle. It is doable. At least within a certain degree of freedom. Okay. So now I have these two little clamps coming off here. I'm going to take this and extrude. Thing about extruding, when you extrude, you're also taking the face with it, so you don't have to worry about recreating that face. So I tend to like to do that instead of like connecting vertices together as much as possible. So extrude up, extrude again. Move this one. I'm just extruding, rotating, and scaling. There are cleaner ways to do this to make it more perfect. But I'm not worried about that right now because this is a post-apocalyptic setting. And I don't need it to be perfect. Actually, we're going to move this back into about the middle. Scale Y0. And then this is a great example of when. So now I have my two extrusions. I want to connect them together. What I'm going to do, I want to make sure there's no face in the middle. So I'm deleting these faces first. So selection mode face, click on that face and delete it. Then I'm going to select the points here. Actually, we'll start with the bottom. We're going to select 4 points, press F to make a single face. Cool, cool. And then we can select 2 points, F, F, and F. There we go, all sealed in. Oh, now the scaling's a little weird. So I'm just going to take that. Actually, we're going to do the other side. Take this side. We're going to press X. And we're going to apply that to, let me see if I can get these. Scale X0, just make sure they're lined up, and then X, Control V. Now, no, these ones too. Okay. These guys, I also want scale X0 and X at the same spot. Ah, okay. So it's not quite lined up with, I think that's the pommel that I'm seeing all the way at the end. Yeah, I think that's the pommel. If I select all of those, oh, maybe not. Okay, I want to make sure that these are all lined up. This is being extra finicky. I don't really need to do this. This is just me being picky. Scale X to 0. There we go. Okay. And you can see I didn't do anything yet on the other side, and that's because we're just going to mirror this whole thing. So now that I have this shape more or less set, it's not quite yet what I want. Scale Y0. And I want these guys to come out more. Take that, scale Z to 0, make that nice and flat. And same for you, scale Z to 0. Boom. Interesting, I'm gonna have to deal with that. This geometry is a little messy right now. You can see here it's pretty okay. It's just because I added a loop cut there. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this. We're going to move it back. And we're going to add that loop cut here instead. And go back, take this, do the same thing as before. Make sure all of these are scaled to x to 0, and make sure that the 0 is that number. Okay. Good. Nice and clean. Okay. And again, this one, the Z, Control Z, Control V. Good, good, good. Cool. So that looks like a piece of scrap metal that could have been taken from something, which is what I want. But you can see this side is all wonky. We're going to fix that right now. Add a loop right down the middle. Make sure everything is zeroed. And this is the local numbers. So 0x is not the middle of the cursor. 0x is the middle of this object. Just make sure that that's actually 0. Okay. We're going to take all of that and delete the vertices. So we have half an object here. I did do something that I'm glad I noticed. I have to add an extra loop cut. Turn off transparency for a second. Into the middle, make sure that's scaled x 0, and make sure that that's 0. Okay. Transparency back on. And delete. Good, good, good. Oh. Yes, I'm still listening to my music. That's it's been like 2 hours. All right. That's pretty good. I'm probably going to call it pretty soon after this weapon is finished then. So once I have that, we're going to add our mirror modifier. Good, it's mirroring correctly. I'm going to turn on clipping. I love me some royalty-free synthwave music. I hope other people do as well. Make sure that that's all blended together. Boom. Blocked out weapon. Look at that. Okay. That's pretty much what I was going for. Okay. So of course there's a little bit that can be done here to clean up this little... I'm only thinking of the word in Japanese, tsuba, which is weird. The hilt here. Clean up the pommel here. And maybe thicken up the blade. Depends a little bit. I have to check with my concept art. This part seems a little thin. Now this gap here could cause some problems with printing. We'll see if it's really what I want. But for now, it looks kind of cool. I think. Although actually, now that I think about it, what we are gonna do here, see how it looks. This won't change anything drastically. I think that does look a little bit better shorter. Cool. All right, so I think that's good for today's stream, a couple hours. And I could keep going, and I probably will after off camera. But I've got the basic bits blocked out. So I've got everything basically where I want it to be. From here, it's going to be a process of adding details, adding smaller objects like straps and the belt, and cleaning up and sculpting details onto the bigger objects, like the pants. So I'll do some of that off camera, and I'll save some of the final detailing work for another live stream, which should be happening in 2 weeks. Although I'm going to be on a little bit of a trip, so I'm not sure if I'll be able to make it to the stream in 2 weeks. So we'll see. I'll let folks know. But otherwise, this is the beginnings of my Spire-Born, first Spire-Born miniature. Thanks for watching, everyone. Extra shout out to Ethan. Thank you for joining and commenting and asking questions. Thank you for being here. And I'll see you next time. Toodaloo.